Hello, everyone. We welcome you to another episode of Marriages of the Kingdom with Adrian and Nicole. We are coming to you from WYTV7, Christian Broadcasters Network out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And we are excited that you could tune in with us again on today. We are a nonprofit organization, and we would truly appreciate your donations if you and your family have been blessed by Marriages of the Kingdom and WYTV7. If you would like to donate, please go to our website, and that is WYTV7.org. Again, that's WYTV7.org, and you can click on the donate button there. And then also for next month, there is Giving Tuesday. It will be November the 27th. Again, Giving Tuesday is November the 27th. And we do encourage you to also go to our website and give on November the 27th. We truly appreciate it. And for this month, as you see, we both are wearing purple on today. And this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we do want to deal with this topic. And so that's what this episode of Marriages of the Kingdom will deal with on today. And we want to deal with this ugly truth that a lot of people do not like to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it, and especially in our churches. And we want to talk about today, what do we do as leaders? What do we do as family members when someone comes to you and states that they've been abused or they are being abused by their spouse, their boyfriend, their girlfriend? What do we do in those situations? And one thing we want to say on today, for Christians, prayer alone is not enough. And I want to say that again, in domestic violence relationships, prayer alone is not enough. Yes, there is power in prayer, but there are also practical steps that have to be taken as well. And what you want to do, if someone does come to you, you want to be able to walk them through the stages of seeking help. If you don't know what to do, please seek out someone that can. There are a lot of sites that you can go to and Google and get help. There are 800 numbers that you can contact. But what we don't want to do is do nothing. That's the main thing. And on today, we want to share some facts with you regarding domestic violence. And one of those facts is 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been in or will encounter in a relationship where they are physically abused in some way, physically, emotionally abused in some way. And so those numbers are alarming. And again, that is 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will be abused at some point in a relationship in their life. Another one of the facts that we want to discuss today is the victims, they will see a glimpse of the person they fell in love with continually. Even while they're being abused, they will see a glimpse of the person they fell in love with. And what they hold on to is that glimpse. And that's why they remain in relationships for so long, in these abusive relationships, because what we hear a lot of times from people is, well, why don't she just leave? Well, why doesn't he just leave? It's not that simple. It's not that cut and dry. Actually, it's very complicated, it's very complex, and it's very difficult. And that's what we want to deal with today, the whys. It's not that simple because, as we know, or if you didn't know, abusers, they control initially emotionally. And so these people are connected. The abuser and the abusee are connected emotionally, and that's why they don't just leave. And so how do you respond as a leader? We're leaders, we're pastors. How do you respond as a leader in your church if a young lady in your church comes to you and states that your church musician, the minister at your church, your associate pastor at your church, your elder at your church is physically abusing them? How do we respond? And we want to deal with that because our response in these situations is very important. Our response in these situations could mean life or death. How do we respond in those situations? How do you respond when a wife has come to you and stated that their husband is physically abusing them in your church? What do you do? How do you respond? Because your response says everything to that victim, and you need to understand that. Because if this takes place, this person, you need to get to the core of what's going on. But if you still have minister so-and-so or pastor so-and-so still on the pulpit preaching after a wife has came to you and stated they're being physically abused, that's like another kick in the gut to that person, to that victim, when nothing is done. And so we have to deal with these things. They're very uncomfortable. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's even uncomfortable for us to even talk about it today, but it has to be dealt with. And it's one of those truths that you can't push under the rug. And one of the main things with domestic violence, and if someone comes to you, the first step in the situation should be to try to get the victim to safety. You want to get them to a place of safety. You want to get them out of harm's way first and foremost before anything. And then one of the things I want to also mention and deal with too, if you are currently married and you're in an abusive relationship, and for those that are dating, we want you to recognize the signs, because those that are currently married and that are in abusive relationships, abusive marriages, the abuse did not start after you said I do. What happened is you missed the warning signs that were there. And that's what we want to give you today, some of those warning signs. And we want you to pay attention to this. Single men, single women, pay attention. And even those that are married, pay attention to these warning signs. Because if you're currently being abused, or you in a relationship that even resemble anything close to what we will be discussing as we go further into this episode, you want to get out. And if you are the abuser, you want to get some help.
All right, so let's discuss some of the signs of abusive behavior. And these are in no particular order. So we'll just start with the first one. The first one is extreme jealousy. Extreme jealousy. Signs of abusive behavior. Jealousy is a sign of insecurity, and it's also a lack of trust. But the abuser will say that it's love. It's a sign of love. The abuser will question the victim about who they talk to, accuse them of flirting or being jealous of time spent with their friends, family, co-workers, or children.
And we want to stop right there. That's important, that extreme jealousy. Pay attention to that. And as I was preparing for this the last couple weeks, thinking about coming up as a child, as a teenager, in my early 20s, I remember ladies in my family or women in the neighborhood and aunts, and they would make statements like, oh, he really loves her, you know, when he's like following her and doing all of these things. And with all of that extreme jealousy, he really loves her. That is not love. And that's what everyone needs to understand. Love, trust. Love does not operate in where you don't trust the person. And that's where the jealousy comes in at, because it's a lack of trust. And that's what we need to understand today. Love does not hurt at all. Love does not create this type of pain. And so we want you to understand that, because there's misconceptions there. Like I stated, like years ago, they would make statements like that. Oh, he really loves you, honey. That's why he does this. That's why he follows you everywhere. That's why he's jealous of everybody. No, that is not love. And we want you to really pay attention to that, because that's one of the first things a lot of times that you will see in abusive relationships.
All right. As we continue with extreme jealousy, the abuser may call the victim frequently or drop by unexpectedly. This is a thin line because you don't want to confuse the two. There are many loving women and loving men who do call their spouses or their respected girlfriend or boyfriend repeatedly. It just depends on the relationship of what it is that they do. So the line is very thin. So understand that the abuser may want to call the victim more frequently. If you get to calling a person every 10 minutes, you may have an issue. That may be a problem. And as we go through the remainder of this session, as we talk about signs of behavior and what it is that it displays, we also want to bring about the positive side in knowing that there is help.
Yes, definitely.
There is help for every man, there is help for every woman, and we have to include woman because, as the statistics state, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men. So it could work either way. A lot of times we want to lean on one side and just say, oh, it's only the woman. No, there are some men who are battered, who are abused, and who are bruised as well.
Yeah, and that is very true. There are men that abuse. We have encountered men that have been abused physically as well ourselves as marriage counselors. And so there are men that abuse, but statistics do show that women are abused more than men are. And so we want to deal with that, but we're dealing with it on both sides, because coming from a Christian aspect, we do know that there is hope for both the abuser and the abusee. And so we want to keep that in mind. And just like Adrian just stated, that there is help available to either.
All right, another sign of abusive behavior is controlling behavior. Controlling behavior. One person in the relationship completely rules the relationship and makes all of the decisions. This includes checking up on the victim, timing a victim when they leave the house, checking the odometer on the car, questioning the victim about where it is that they go, what time did they leave, what time did they get back, what time should I expect you back. They may also check the victim's cell phone. Here's one for the age that we're living in now. Cell phones, call history, email, website history. For those of us who have passwords and codes and locks on our phones and on our computers, and our spouses don't know how to get into it, that could be viewed as a problem. More than likely, that is a problem. So we have to understand the abuser may want to control all the finances. They want to control how the victim may dress, how they may look, where they may go, who they talk to, when they go talk to them, where it is they go. Control is a major, major issue. And once you see the signs, don't hesitate. Many times we see signs and we want to overlook them and say, oh, it's okay. Oh, that's just how they are sometimes. That's not always. But if you be around that long enough, that behavior will become stronger and stronger and stronger. So you want to do something immediately when you see the signs.
Yes, and one of the things I want to go back here where Adrian was just talking about the abuser will want to check the victim's odometer. I had a friend who she actually got into several car accidents because her husband would time her. And if she got in a traffic accident, a traffic jam or anything, she knew that he would beat her when she got home. And so she would try to rush to get home. If she told him that she was going to Walmart, he would time the distance from the house to Walmart. If there was a stop, if she decided she wanted to stop at CVS, that was a problem for him. And so she knew that all hell was going to literally break loose when she got home. That is no way for anyone to live.
Anyone.
That is not love. That is not love. You should not be on pins and needles and walk on eggshells in your marriage. Absolutely. There's a problem when someone wants to time you. Well, why were you at this place that long? And why did it take that long? And there's a problem where even if you feel you have to explain every single thing, because it shows a lack of trust from that other person. You know, of course, if you go to the grocery store, you might want to stop and go to 2, 3 other stores, especially as a woman. There is something wrong when someone wants to question your every move. And so that turned out to be a very detrimental marriage for her. It did not end well because of the jealousy and the physical abuse in the marriage. And it put a lot of pressure and a lot of strain on her, even in her work life, because she was constantly stressed, because he was one, as Adrian mentioned, constantly calling and texting, and even on her job, to where she couldn't work because she was constantly getting calls and texts from him. So men and women, pay attention to these signs, you know, because a lot of times, Adrian mentioned that we do look at those, and there's a very fine line between someone being concerned about you and where you're at, and that controlling nature that comes from abusers. So pay attention to that very fine line that's there. And we want to talk next about quick involvement. That's one of the other things when it comes to domestic violence, quick involvement. And what that means is sometimes a lot of these relationships, they happen very suddenly, very quickly. And the abuser wants to lock that person in as quickly as possible into their relationship. And initially, it may come across as if that person is head over heels for you. And that's not the case. Their abusers, it's about control. And part of that control is, I want you, and I want you now, and I have to have you right now. And so you may think that, oh, this person just really loves me, and oh, they'll say things to you like, we have to be together right now, you know. Why wait? What's the purpose in waiting? You know, we need to be together right now. So pay attention to those type of things. Another thing, the abuser will come on strong in the beginning of the relationship. They'll pressure you for a commitment, and they'll claim that it's love at first sight. That's one of the things. They will also claim that you're the only person that I could ever talk to. You're the only person that I ever want. They will also say, I've never met anyone like you. I've dated, or I was married to somebody else before, but I've never met anyone like you. Pay very close attention to the flattery, because that's what it is. Abusers are very charming. They're very skilled and crafty when it comes to their conversation. They're very, very skilled and crafty when it comes to, for lack of other words, luring you in. So pay attention to those type things, because that is one of the things that you really want to watch out for, that they really try to lock you in like immediately. And the love per se is very intense. They per se love very intense. There's where, like I stated earlier, they can't do without you. The love appears to be very strong. And so pay attention to those type things too as well. And then another thing here is the abusers, and we're talking about unrealistic expectations. Now, that's another sign. Abusers always want the person that they're in a relationship with to meet all their needs. It is all about them. That's part of that control. They want you to meet all of their needs, and they want you to be perfect. As we all know, you know, we're married, and those are dating. There's no perfect person. There's no perfect relationship. So that is an unrealistic expectation that will be placed on the victim, to just be perfect. If you're a wife, to be the perfect wife, the food has to be right. The clothes have to be ironed. You know, everything has to be just right. The house has to be clean a certain way. That's part of the abusive behavior that comes from abusers. So be aware of that. And then they also may say things to you like, if you love me, then I'm all you need. And I mentioned that because we're going to go into the next thing, which is isolation. They'll say to you, you are all that I need. I'm all you need, because abusers want to put you into a place of isolation. They want to get you to a place to where you're literally locked in a fence with them, and it's just you and them. Abusers are jealous of children, their own children, and their relationship with their spouse. They're jealous of them. They're jealous of other family members, mothers, fathers, friends, co-workers. Abusers are jealous of any and everybody that's around you that they feel may get more attention than them. And so pay very close attention to that, because that's also one of the things, and they want to isolate you. They may want to try to keep you from going to work or school. I do know women that have not worked in years because their spouse does not want them to work. Part of that is, yes, and part of that is because they don't think that, or what they feel is, if they go outside the house and they're doing different things, then they're going to beat somebody else. And it goes back to that lack of trust. It goes back to that insecurity that abusers walk in. And so pay attention to those things too, men and women.
All right, another behavior is that the abuser blames other people, blames someone else. The abuser does not take responsibility for their problems, blaming others, especially the victim, for almost everything. You made me mad. You made me do it. If you hadn't went left, I wouldn't have went right. If you hadn't went up, I wouldn't have went down. Always finding some type of excuse to blame someone else for their own behavior. So when you see these things, even if it's in yourself, you have to ask yourself the question, is this really me? And if it is you, then you have to go seek the necessary help that you need to make you better for you.
And like Adrian was just talking about, one of the things too that I've experienced with victims, what happens is, because the abuser starts telling them, well, I hit you because you did that. I said this to you. I verbally abused you because you did that. Because you have to understand also, all abuse is not physical. There are some abusers that they tear their victims down emotionally by what they say to them. And then there are some that are physical as well. So all abuse is not physical, but whatever it is, abuse, you have to understand, is always about control. Regardless what kind of abuse it is, it's about control. And a lot of times the victim has been beat down so much emotionally that now they start to believe what it is that the abuser is speaking to them. And so I will hear them make statements like, well, I did do this. Well, I should have did that. Well, I could have did this differently. And now what you're doing as a victim is blaming yourself for another person's reckless behavior. And you want to stay away from that, if at all possible, because there is nothing that you could ever say or do if you're a victim that can provoke a person from bringing out what's already in them. It's already there. And so, but they will use you as an excuse for a behavior that's already there. And so what you don't want to do as a victim is victimize yourself, because that can happen as well.
All right. The next behavior we're going to look at is hypersensitivity. There's a word. Hypersensitivity. An abuser is easily insulted and takes everything as a personal attack and blows things out of proportion. Wait a minute.
When you're talking about hypersensitivity, because abusers, everything's about control and they're very emotional, a lot of Abusers, and there's a fine line there too, because abusers are emotional, but they have controlled emotions too. They know how to control their emotions in different situations around different people. That's why a lot of times you will have people that come forth and say, you know, my husband or my wife abused me, and somebody will respond, well, not that person. They have to be lying. No, this is a wonderful, outstanding person in society. No, there's no way that they would do that. There is a way, and it does happen because abusers can control their behavior when they're in different environments. It's literally, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They can control that behavior. And with the hypersensitivity that Adrian just mentioned, abusers are very sensitive a lot of times. You can say one thing to them and they hear something else. It's never whatever it is that you say to them. It could be constructive criticism, but they look at it as a personal attack, and that's where that hypersensitivity comes in at. And it takes them to a place of explosion a lot of times, because they constantly think if you mention anything or say anything to them that they don't like, that it's an attack. And so because they think it's an attack, they're going to go on the attack. And that's where that abuse kicks in at a lot of times.
All right, next let's look at playful use of force of sex. A playful, quote unquote, use of force of sex. The abuser may want to throw or hold their partner, their spouse, down during sex. They may want to pressure their spouse into having sex. They may demand sex when their spouse is tired or ill or doesn't want to have sex at all. They may ask the victim to do things they don't want to do. So we have to be mindful that even as you go into your bedroom, your place of physical intimacy, many times a part of the abuser's behavior, they will become playful when it comes to sex and trying to force things and try to make things more than what it should be. So you have to be mindful of that. Again, it all goes back to, we discussed it several times, it goes back to communication. You have to be able to communicate with your spouse on what it is when it comes to sex, what it is they want or don't want or like or dislike. And then the two of you have to come to an understanding and an agreement. When the two are not in agreement, then you're always going to have problems in that area. There's always going to be some problems. So let's be mindful of the playful use of force of sex.
Yes, because whether you're married or not married, your spouse cannot force any type of sexual activity on you. Even in marriage, no means no. And so just like Adrian just mentioned, it'll come across as playful at first, because now they're trying to see how far it is that they can get with whatever type of behavior it is. So pay attention to those type things, so that you don't end up in situations that you really don't want to be in. Because like he mentioned too, abusers will force you to have sex when you're sick. And I've talked to spouses to where they were like deathly ill and their spouse has forced them to have sexual intercourse with them. Again, the abuse goes back to control, because how pleasurable could it be to have sex with your spouse when you force them to do something and they're sick? And so that tells you that there's an issue there as well. So pay attention to those type things.
All right, we're almost done. Next, we're going to talk about verbal abuse. We mentioned it a few minutes ago. Nicole mentioned it a few minutes ago in one of her statements, verbal abuse. The abuser says cruel and harmful things to their victim, degrades them, curses at them, call them names, put down their accomplishments. The abuser tells their victims they are stupid, unable to function without them. They embarrass and put down the victim in front of others as well.
Yes. That's one of the biggest signs. Like I mentioned earlier, all abuse is not physical. Again, there are some spouses that tear their husband or wife down with their mouth. It's not always with their hands and their fists. They tear them down with their mouth. And again, like Adrian was talking about, they degrade them. They call them names. They're in marriage counseling. We tell couples all the time there should never be a time where you are calling your spouse names and degrading them and saying all of these negative things to them, because that is a form of abuse. Also, really pay attention to that. And then another thing with another sign is, I mentioned it earlier also, you have that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde behavior. The abuser has extreme mood swings. The victim may actually think that their spouse or their boyfriend or girlfriend has mental issues, because that's how drastic those mood swings are that they have. 1 minute they're just very loving and charming and kind and wonderful, and the next minute you're experiencing a monster. You're looking at somebody that you have no idea who it is. And I've heard women say, it wasn't my husband. It wasn't the person that I married, because that's how drastic that change is. That's how they flip from one mood to another within a drop of a dime. And so pay attention to that. That is not normal. And a lot of times there's a lot of explosiveness. When they get to that place and the mood swings happen, if they're physically abusive, that's when they actually go into the physical altercations with their spouses. Be careful, watch the signs. This is not normal. And a lot of times, a lot of people that are abused, now that person that is being abused, the victim, will hear, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. I didn't mean to do that. It'll never happen again. What I will tell you, if it happened one time, it'll happen again. And what I will tell you is, typically, unless the abuser is a teenager, because the behavior a lot of times start as children, they may abuse animals growing up, cats, dogs, different things. They may start with things like that, not, being abusive to animals. A lot of times you're not the first person that they've abused. And so keep that in mind. If it happened one time, it'll happen again. And that goes into our next thing. Abusers a lot of times have a past history of battering men or women, depending on the situation. The batterer will beat anyone they are with if the person is with them long enough. So it may start out verbally sometimes, but if you're in a relationship like that, there are a lot of times where abusers will hit walls. They will kick walls. They will do things like that, knock things over. That, a lot of times, those are behaviors of abusers. And if you stay with them long enough, they will hit you as well. So pay attention to those type things in the relationship. And another thing, you need to understand that situational circumstances do not cause a person to have an abusive relationship. A situation does not cause them to be an abuser. That's where their excuse comes in at, to say this happened because, and that's why I did that. Situational circumstances does not cause them to be abusers. They're abusers because there's something in there, there's something lacking in them, and they need to get help for that. And another thing, there will be a use of violence and threats of violence in abusive relationships, or even when you're dating. A lot of times victims will see situations and they'll see this other person that they don't know when they're in the dating process. And they'll kind of like overlook those red flags. Like, well, he or she, they had a bad day. They just had a bad day. It wasn't a good day. They had a hard day at work. This happened. They were in a car accident. There will always be some type of excuse for that. And so a lot of times violence can include holding the victim down. There should never be a time where somebody is holding you down to, you know, I need you to listen to me, or I need you to do that, this or that. That's not normal. Restraining them from leaving a room, or pushing or shoving or holding them against the wall, that is abuse. Because a lot of times what you will hear is, oh, I didn't hit them, I just held them. I just pushed them a little bit. That is abuse. And that type of behavior can go further into physical abuse. And then another thing, abusers may also throw or break objects. And we talked about that a minute ago, kicking, hitting walls, those type things, knocking things over, knocking pictures off the wall, those type things. The abuser may also strike objects near the victim to frighten them. So they may not necessarily hit you per se at that time, but they may smack a table or something that's next to you with attempts of controlling you, of threatening you. And so that is not normal behavior at all. And please don't make excuses for that. And then you might get threats of, I'll kill you. If you ever, one of the biggest reasons a lot of times abusers have victims that stay with them for long periods of time is because of the threat of, I will kill you if you leave me. I will kill you if you leave me. That's what they say to them. I will kill the children. I will kill the children, you and myself, if you leave me. They make statements like that. And they put this fear in the victim to where they stay in those situations for long periods of time and endure that abuse. And sometimes there's times where they endure that abuse till death. Because if it continues, it can end in death.
And again, make sure that we do not ignore the signs. Don't ignore the signs, because to get to the point to where we're just talking about the I'll break your neck statements and I'll kill you, those statements, those are statements that come at the end of the process. They don't come at the beginning. All the other things happen in the beginning. So you have to be mindful of the certain behaviors that go along with it, so you don't get to this end part of I'll kill you and I'll break your neck. So let's make sure we recognize the signs.
And one of the biggest things with this, and we're bringing awareness to this, because awareness needs to be brought to this because it's not done enough. Of course, this is Domestic Violence Month, Awareness Month, but it happens continuously, hour on the hour, minute on the minute. Someone is being abused physically, and we need to discuss it. It happens in our churches. You have husband and wives that are sitting in churches, and it may have been a spouse that was abused that morning, and they come on to church together as if nothing happened. We have to pay attention to the signs of abuse around us and not ignore. If you see something or in a situation where you conversate with someone and there appears to be signs of abuse, it needs to be discussed. It needs to be brought to the forefront immediately so that they can get help. These are not situations where you want to say, well, let me go think about it. Let me go pray about it. And no, they need to get to a place of safety if they're being abused.
Absolutely.
And you also need to try to seek to get the abuser some help as well as these situations. You know, coming from the Christian aspect of it, God does not cast out anybody. And so yes, the victim comes first because you want to get them to a place of safety. You want to get them out of harm's way. But you also do not want to leave the abuser out there dangling so that they can go do it again. So you want to try to get them to a place of restoration as well, because you get them away from the victim and they may no longer be together if that abuser does not get help. Now, can you make them get help? No, you can't. But you can at least try to direct them into a direction where they can get some help. Because if you just kind of separate them and say, okay, well, you stay away from him or you stay away from her, now that abuser is not healed. They're going to go abuse again. They will find another victim. abusers will always find another victim if they don't get help. So try to help the abuser as well, as you're helping the person, the victim that's being abused, if at all possible, because it's not always possible. And we do appreciate you on today. This is, again, a very hurtful, a topic that nobody wants to deal with. It's a very painful topic. Abuse is a very secretive thing a lot of times, because most of the time the victim is ashamed. The victim is ashamed that they have married this person, and 2 years later, this person is not who they thought that they were. Not that that person has changed, because one of the biggest things we said is they missed the signs. Not missed the signs, they didn't pay attention to the signs. They didn't pay attention to the red flags. And so if you are in a relationship like this, or if you have behaviors that represent being an abuser, get some help. Either way, get some help. But if you're a victim first and foremost, and if you have kids in your house, get to safety. That's the biggest thing. And one of the ways you can get to safety, there's a number you can call, and that is 1-800-323-HOPE. 1-800-323-HOPE. But get you some help, please. Whatever you do, get some help.
All right, again, as this was a very serious topic, very serious discussion. If you are in, or if you know someone who's involved in this type of relationship, this type of behavior, don't make fun of them. Don't scoff them. Don't gossip. Encourage them. Encourage them to get some help. Encourage them to seek counsel. Encourage them to get to a better place. All right. Again, we thank you for tuning in with us for another episode of Marriages of the Kingdom. And we invite you to connect with us via our website, marriagesofthekingdom.com. Again, that's marriagesofthekingdom.com, or via email, info@marriagesofthekingdom.com, info@marriagesofthekingdom.com. Until next time, please be intentional about your marriage.